Good morning.
Good morning, Professor Bell.
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Why'd they spell your name wrong on your ID? Who does
We
that?
were in there for like, we were in there for like, so they had me in there for an hour. I came in, I did my permit test, and then there was an even longer wait for me to take the picture because they already had me waiting like for an hour to get like to take the test. So then they had me wait for this. So and then we took the picture and she kept messing up. So by then I'm
I'm
mumbling my
sorry, I'm laughing
words.
at your pain, but it's a pretty funny story.
I'm upset about it anymore, but it's like she kept messing up. I kept grumbling my words. Had an angry face. It's like
So, I have a foster son living with us, and he took his permit test while we were here, and they absolutely spelled his middle name wrong on his, like, so it's not you.
it's not
It's
me.
like the
It's the
process at the
institution.
MBA. They're just kind of a little bit all over the place. But I was like, okay, I mean, we gave you the document and everything, and you just put a whole letter wrong in there, but that's fine. So yeah, it's not just you, it's everybody apparently. But it was a process. You're not wrong. It was quite a process.
Glad to know I'm not alone in that.
Yeah. I just
Like
thought it was
I had always thought like the stories of like the MVA is like the worst place ever. I thought it was just like a joke. I thought it wasn't real, but
uh,
like it's real.
oh yeah. And one of my favorite things ever is in that movie
Utopia.
Utopia. Yes,
Yeah.
sloths. Oh my gosh. Me and my wife just crack up whenever we see the sloth. We're just like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Everything is just so slow. No rush for anything. But it's okay. It's okay. I still am like happy that somebody is there to do that job for us.
Yep.
And I I'm happy that I got my license and nobody made me change my picture, Nigel. My picture is the same one as when I was like 21 years old. So
Uh,
I
I hope they let me take a new picture.
I hope so for your sake.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We're just chatting because Nigel had a funny comment for me on his intro to me assignment. He and my foster son both have their names spelled wrong on their government IDs. So I just think it's kind of funny that, we went to the MBA and still got our information incorrect, even though we were just standing there getting our stuff filled out. So good morning. Good morning. I see everybody's logging in. Good morning. Hello. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I saw so many awesome. I already took a look at your first day submissions. If you turned it in and had submitted that on time, you already got a response from me with some feedback on there. The response might have included, hey, I have to see this again because I really needed it to look like X. So it's possible that you have to resubmit, and then I'll just like change it to a complete grade after that. But the majority of the submissions were really good. And remember, the point of that was so you can go in and you can see what I write on your paper, so that in the future, when you go and you submit, and when you go and submit all your take-home quizzes way early for feedback, because I know you will, I will be able to write on them and you can see all that feedback and make changes and grow from our conversations together that way. Okay. So hopefully we can all see that feedback, which was the most important part of getting that information on that page for you. Finally, I also I told my first class this, you know how I made you do the intro video in Flipgrid, which is like that little website that has little quick videos. I accidentally was viewing your videos in Flipgrid itself. And I was like, oh, they're talking back and forth. They're so great. They're introducing each other. And then I realized I wasn't able to grade from where I was. So I couldn't give any feedback. I couldn't add a comment or a video. I was in the wrong setting to grade. So I promise you that today, tomorrow, and this weekend, I will have the time to really look through all those introductory videos and take a look at that information and give some really good feedback. I was like verbally talking to you. You guys were talking and I was like talking to my computer. Oh my God, that's so great. Me too, you know? And then I was like, oh, nobody can hear my comments or see anything from the setting that I'm in. So that's great. Okay. I will work on that this weekend. I promise. I have lots and lots of videos because I have about 75 students total in statistics. So give me some time, but my goal is to work on that and finish grading them over the weekend. The other thing I wanted to bring up, a lot of people in their first day submission, when I said, what makes you nervous about the class or what makes you anxious about the class, many of us wrote down that the most anxious feeling we get is when we're ready to take that exam, right? And a lot of us maybe have noted based on Tuesday's conversation that a good portion of our percentage for the grade comes from that exam. So I do want to alleviate hopefully a little bit of that stress to let you know what I do know about the format for the exams that will occur in the scheduled remote class together. Okay, so there's two options this semester. You could have taken, if you wanted quote face-to-face, right? We could be here in the scheduled remote Zoom environment where you can take the class from any location, or we could have taken it face-to-face on campus. So the students who are on campus, they will take a paper exam where they can write on the exam. And that might be a little bit more common, like what we expect out of a math test. But those students are able to bring only one sheet of notes with them to their exam as note paper. You guys will be taking your exam with me on Zoom through Canvas. So there'll be a slight learning curve that we have to type our answers in, right? That's a little different, but we get to use all of our notes. Like everything you have access to from the beginning of Unit 1 to the end of Unit 1 can be sitting next to you during that exam. Okay, so while yes, maybe we don't get to write down on paper our thoughts, right? And we have to type them out, and that's a little weird for math. We will have access to every resource that you can study from for the whole unit. And then there will be, you will still be able to use those notes on the final exam as well. Karen, there is a time limit. And honestly, we have been debating that time limit as faculty. And so the time limit is somewhere, please don't quote me on this, it is somewhere between 65 and 75 minutes, an hour and 5 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes. It's just over an hour. And in the past, that's been very reasonable. However, if you know friends that have taken this class before in the Zoom setting, the exams did change this semester. So in the past, my students, they were not allowed to go back, right? You had to answer question 1 and move immediately to question 2 and then move immediately to question 3, and you could not go backwards. This semester, you can go forwards and backwards in your test, all right? You can look at question 1, know that you don't know how to answer it, skip it, go to question 2, and then come back to it later, okay? So I think that alone will also alleviate some stress in the Canvas testing environment. But yes, Karen, as soon as I know the time limit, I will make everybody aware of it. And the coordinators will write the exam with that particular time limit in mind. So it won't be like too long. Like they'll shorten it if they're only going to give us 65 minutes, right? And they'll make, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to make it unreasonable for you. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if we're going to be allowed to look at the tests after it's over, but you can go back in the moment of the test and like see it, right? Once the test is submitted, it is possible that security wise, the coordinators will not allow you to see it again. Okay. But if that's the case, I will make a fake test and we can go over that if you have any questions about it. Okay. So there'll be a way to review with me. Don't worry. If there's any questions you get wrong, we will review them and we will do it together in office hours or something. Okay. Are we needing to work on our Unit 1 student packet at all? Madison, all the work in the Unit 1 student packet that we do would happen in class together. And if I mention something like we won't have time to finish this problem, then I would expect that maybe you would do that for additional practice. I'm not collecting it and I'm not assigning it a grade. It's just to make sure that we're all following along together. So today we're going to pull up page 1 of the Unit 1 student packet and work on some of those problems together. The reason I provide you with a packet is because I don't want to sit and watch you guys copy down the examples. I want to just get into the examples with you, right? And circle and highlight all this important stuff. So that's why it's all printed and ready for you. Okay, there's one other thing. between last class and this class, I posted our Zoom recording for Tuesday, and I need to show you where it is, just in case you miss a class or you want to go and revisit a class. So this is our Canvas site, and you just have to go to modules. And I can actually minimize these if I want to, but it's in the unit. Since we're in unit 1, I put everything in the unit 1 module. So if you scroll down to the bottom of unit 1, it says unit 1 Zoom recordings, and you can click that. And every day I'll try to put some sort of descriptor, like what did we do and what was the date, so that if you're looking for a day, you can find it that you missed. But if you're looking for a topic, you can also go back and find it. So that's where that information is located. Okay, so in our Canvas site under the unit 1 module at the very bottom. Okay, so going off of what Madison said, I'm going to immediately pull up and start sharing my unit 1 student packet so we can feel like we're all around this on the same page, like physically on the same page, but also mentally together in the content on the same page. Okay, so I'm literally on page 1 of, oops, you can't see the top, but I'm on page 1 of the student packet for unit 1, right at the top. And as a class last time, I remember that we got to do we like saw all the definitions, but we didn't get to do the examples. So we haven't really started much of this at all. Now, I do have a lesson I learned in my first class. I told you guys, because you guys at the second class, it's always going to be better, right? So I learned that question 2 is actually the question we should do first. My first class, question 2 was easier for them than question 1. So we're going to start with question 2. Okay. And the goal here is to talk about some of the vocabulary that we learned last class. All right. So I'm going to focus on, I'm actually going to scroll this a bit so we can see question number 3 at the same time, but I'm just on page number 1, so we can do all of this together. All right, we're going to read through number 1, or excuse me, number 2. We're going to do number 2 first, and then we're going to go to number 1. That's my fault for writing my packet in a bad order. But I just learned.
Ms. Bell?
Yes, Davina.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a quick question.
Sure.
So by now, should we already have homework 1.1 already done?
You mean in Alex?
Yes.
I would say that you should feel really confident after today for sure to be able to go and crush that, because we will do the examples that are directly related to it.
Gotcha.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
If you already did it, more power to you. You'll be even more prepared for today. But I always say that if you're struggling with it at all, that you could wait until after we cover it together and then just try to work on it tonight.
Got it. Thank you.
Technically, we have until next week, though, to work on all of that, to really get it.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. I like where your kind of like thought process, though, Davina, is like, if I do it today, then I'll know it and it's fresh, right? So yeah, I do like that. Like, yes, if we cover 1.1, I totally agree. You should go and do that homework sooner than later. Yep.
All righty. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a private chat, but I do need to address it for the whole class. It says, do we get to redo the Alex assignments? Yes, the Alex assignments have unlimited attempts at 100%. The one downside to that is that Alex insists that you watch the video, right? So you have to let the video play, like even if you've already watched it, to get a green check mark for that problem. But yes, you can redo every assignment. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, guys, number 2, we're going to start with number 2. I know you think I'm crazy to go to number 2 first, but let's do it. A vet wants to learn more about the proportion of overweight dogs at their practice. I'm circling number 2 to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. From their client list of over 6,000 dogs, the vet randomly selects 150 dogs and looks more closely into their records to establish how many are overweight. In this example, what is the population and what is the sample? Okay, so last class, we did talk about these 2 definitions when we were doing our defining on the first day, just because I wasn't sure if we all really watched that video. I wanted to rehash those definitions. Okay, so population, we said, was the entire group, and the sample is my subset. Roman says, okay, population is 6,000 and the sample is 150. Roman, why do you, I like that you're saying it's an SRS because they said they're randomly selected. Why do you know that the sample is the 150? What's a giveaway? Numbers wise. Okay, oh, wording wise. Okay, he randomly selected it. Brittany, yes, look at this wording. Okay, there's like a couple things in the sentences that are giving me a little bit of information here, right? The vet, this is supposed to be a highlighter. The vet randomly selects 150 dogs and looks into their records. So that randomly selecting is creating a sample. Remember, we talked about that on Tuesday. The population is everyone. If I start to randomly select, then I'm creating a smaller group. So yes, I love that that language is a giveaway. Let's talk about the numbers too, though, because Roman, there's another reason why we might be able to more obviously understand that the population being the bigger group is 6,000, right? What's up, Timothy? Were you going to say something?
No, sorry, that was next.
Oh, no, you're fine. So yes, Zoe, 150 is significantly smaller than 6,000. So another giveaway in this particular example, because there are two numbers, is that we have a much larger group. And from that, we selected a smaller one, right? So the larger group would have to represent, quote, everyone in the population. And the smaller group is a subset of them. So a smaller set of those same dogs. Okay, so I actually go for sample first. I think it's easier to talk about the sample first. Then we can go kind of more broadly into the population. So using that randomly selected language that really did give us a nice giveaway, we know our sample is going to be the 150 randomly selected dogs. So our sample, oops, I'm still using my highlighter, my bad, hold on, is the 150 randomly selected dogs. And then I want to ask myself, kind of like Roman, kind of like extrapolate it, go outward from there, right? Well, okay, I got those 150 dogs from where, right? That's where we look at the bigger, broader group. Well, this particular vet has over 6,000 dogs on the client list. Well, I have something in my chat. Let's read. Well, also 6,000 is a guess. So yes, 6,000 plus. That's why I said over 6,000. Thank you, Roman. Yes, I do want to imply that I really don't know how many we're choosing from, but it is quite a large group. Yes. Does anybody have a question for me about differentiating between those two groups in this particular wording? Okay. Now, the wording in number one is what threw off my first class because of the choice of language. So that's why I wanted to do number two actually first. So I'm going to backtrack on you guys and I'm going to go back to number one just so we can discuss the difference in the language. Number two asks us for the population and the sample. Number one says, what's a parameter and what's a statistic, which is another new vocabulary word from the population and sample. So let's read the question so that we feel pretty good about the scenario we're in. It's got a lot of words. And then we're going to try to think about where would a parameter come from and where would a statistic come from? So it says the presidential election of 1968, Richard Nixon won 43.4% of the popular vote and Hubert Humphrey won 42.7% of the popular vote. I need to stop right there because that language was a little bit confusing for my class. What is the popular vote? What does that mean, popular vote?
I'm guessing it means like the majority of the people voted for that person.
Yes, those are, yes, Joseph, those are the results of the actual presidential election. That is correct. So don't be, I told my previous class not to be scarred by the fact that I'm bringing up the election of 2020, but in 2020, we had popular vote results, right? Versus poll results. Like for, if you guys remember, again, don't be scarred by me taking you back to 2020 to try to remember the election. But if you remember correctly, for months, even a year before the election, every week they were throwing numbers at us. 43% support Biden and this percent support Trump. And they just, every week we got a new number thrown at us. But then on election day, everyone theoretically who has the opportunity to vote voted. That is the popular vote. So this are the election results, right? That's the actual election results. Guys, who votes in the presidential election?
American citizens.
Americans, yeah, American
Yeah,
citizens.
American citizens. And technically, all of them who are eligible have the opportunity, correct?
Yes.
Technically, I know that's, we're barring on some politically correct lines here that we don't, not everybody who should have access to vote does, but theoretically those who do vote, correct? So that idea is that this is the large group of US adults as a whole, right? These are the election results for all US adults eligible to vote. So that's where that language threw my class off, because that not everybody was familiar with the term popular vote. Okay, so let me keep reading because I want us to differentiate between that and the next line. It then goes on to say, in a Gallup poll, Gallup is just a scientific research group, okay, conducted in September of 1967, so 1 year before, 43% of those polled favored Nixon, while 28% favored Humphrey. So I'm going to choose a different color highlighter. Well, apparently I don't know how to use my iPad. I just zoomed in accidentally. So that, what's a poll? Is that like a Gallup poll conducted? So a year before the election, they did some research. Did they actually speak to every US adult in 1967?
No, they took a sample.
Yes. Can I call you Tim, or does it have to be Timothy? It's up to you.
Oh, Tim works.
Tim works? Okay, Tim. Yes, they took a small sample of the US population the year before to try to predict what would happen the next year in the election. Excellent. So I want you to circle the words and make sure that we are clear that a poll is equal to a survey of a sample, right? A poll is a smaller survey from a smaller group, not everyone. So Roman, in your answer here, you crushed it. You've got the parameters and statistics. So wait. Oh. Yes, I think. So parameters, the election of 68, September of 67, the statistics. Okay, we want to be careful because I think I'm a little bit confused by your answer there, but that it's like 3 different lines. Okay, Roman, but I agree with the fact that you're saying the parameter is from the election. I want to talk about why. Okay, a parameter versus a statistic. So a parameter is a value from the population. Okay, that's what a parameter is. They actually nicely start with the same exact letter. Parameter, population. Statistic, sample. Oh, so easy to remember. Not really easy, but a little more straightforward than if they were reversed. So a statistic, which is the name of this class, is a value from the sample itself. So this class is not called parameters because parameters are really boring. That's like, I don't gain a lot of information, and it's actually very challenging to find parameters because that implies that we spoke to everyone in the population. So what we do in the real world is we go out and we do what Tim suggested, which is not talk to everyone in the popular vote, but like get a small sample and see how they intend to vote. Then we can use that information to see what might happen in the following year for the population or the parameters. So we use our statistics from our samples to try to make predictions about that population. So if we're talking about specifically parameters from the population, then those were from the popular vote, or the 43.4 and the 42.7. Parameters were from the population, which happened to be represented by the phrase popular vote. So that's where those two numbers came from. So that leaves the rest of the information to be considered statistics, because my smaller Gallup poll was a small sample from that population. So the values from the sample or the statistics come from the Gallup poll. And they were 43 and 28. And guys, I'm here to tell you something happened between 1967 and 1968. Because Humphrey only had 28% of the vote in the sample in 1967, and he had almost 43% of the popular vote. So there was either bad sampling in 67 or a drastic change in the attitudes of the American people.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Are parameters like all so like are parameters always like related to like the populations? Like for example, is the population like is the parameters always going to be like a larger number than that of the statistic?
Ooh, that's hard. You mean physically, like the value is in fact larger from the population?
No, not just the value, but also the amount of people used to gather that information.
So that's two different questions for me, okay, Joseph?
So yes, I guess that is two different questions. Sorry.
And I want to make sure that I'm differentiating, because the sample is going to be a smaller group of individuals than the population. Absolutely, that has to be true. So I want to address that first. My sample is by definition a subset, so it's tinier than the population in terms of size. However, I cannot predict whether the parameter will actually have a larger magnitude or size than the statistic until I go and I gather that information from either one of those groups. I do want to point out though, Joseph, parameters are reported to me. Someone has to tell me what the parameter is, because there's no way for me to go out in the world and speak to everyone in the population in most cases, right? So it's reported out to me, and then I go and I do the research myself to find the statistic. That's typically how this would kind of play out, okay? But I can't guarantee that just because in this example, 28 falls underneath 42.7, that would always be the case. I think that was another part of your question. Okay.
So is sample and statistic the same thing?
The statistics are the numbers that come out of the sample, Karen.
Okay.
So the sample is a smaller group of people. The statistics are the actual values, 43% and 28%.
Okay, got
Yes.
it. Thank you.
Yes, that's like the name of the class. Statistics is because we want to actually talk about those numeric values. Okay. Great question. Thank you. I just got, yes, I needed that. Okay. I just got a direct message, so a private message that explained why there was a change between 1967 and 1968 in the popular vote. And so I'm reading it out loud because I have to, because it's so clarifying. It says, as a social science major, I can confirm that the 1967 protests sparked support for Humphrey. So there was a major change in the US mindset. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Could it also be that people were just undecided?
Yes, Karen, there could be so many variables, so we wouldn't make some sort of direct connection, absolutely. But all of us could tell there had been a change over that year's time. We can't quite pinpoint a single reason why. right? Because so many things likely changed in that 1 year. But yes, you have a good point, Karen, because I'm sure even in 2019, if you had surveyed some people, there would have been questions like, I don't know, so I'm not going to answer, right? So I just abstain and therefore I'm not included. Okay, that was a good question. So many reasons why I didn't answer that or I answered in a different way a year before. Okay, yeah, that's what makes statistics a little tricky sometimes too, is that there are tons of reasons why I might choose to answer in one way or the other. Really good job though, guys. I want to move on and I want to look at the difference between a sample and a population in this next example. And I'm not actually going to scroll. I know that you can't really see the bottom of the board, but I think we'll actually tie in, because we just realized that parameters come from the population and statistics come from the sample. What I'm going to do is kind of rewrite part C right across from population, right? We're going to identify the parameter right next to the population, and then right next to the sample, we'll identify the statistic, because we just said in number 1 that they're directly connected, right? Whoever the population is, they provide us with the parameters. The statistic is going to be from the sample themselves. Roman, give me a second. You in my other class, everybody wanted to have a number for how big the population was, but I don't technically know, but I'll tell you why in just a second, but I like where you're going with it. Okay, let me read the question first before we jump ahead to that. A large cell phone production company, at a large cell phone production company, every 15th phone is removed from the conveyor belt and sent through an inspection. By the end of one day, 250 phones are inspected and found to have an average battery life of 11.4 hours. The phone company advertises a battery life of 12 hours for the same device. Okay. I'm going to go back to, in number 2, it was way easier for me to identify the sample than it was for me to start with the population. So if I'm looking at the sample, what are the phones that we actually touched, inspected? Where's that group of phones? Every 15th phone, Zoe's saying that gives me some information, right, Zoe? Because that's a sampling method right there. Am I right? That was one of the things we talked about on Tuesday. But at the end of the day, how many were in that sample once we chose every 15?
250.
250 total. Thank you, Nigel. So our sample at the end of the day were the 250 phones. I will say systematically so that we can remember that word. Sampled. Why did I say systematically?
Because it was
Yes,
once, it was every 15th.
Yes, they chose. I said 2 people on mute at the same time, so I apologize for that. But they chose a number or system, stuck to it. They didn't deviate. They skipped 14 phones, picked the 15th. Skip 14, pick the 15th. And there's no quote internal bias based on that method. Karen, you're unmuted. Do you have a question for me?
No, that's okay.
Oh, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Okay. So if I sampled 250 phones, right? This is, let me underline systematically. That's where I got the system, right? The 15th phone, that's the system for systematic. Okay. Almost, Roman, give me 1 second to address that, but I don't disagree with your math to get to that point. Okay. So if I survey 250 phones by the end of the day, then the idea is that I could have chosen from any of the phones on the conveyor belt, right? And our objective is to figure out what is the actual population of interest, right? So my question is it phones that day or is it phones? Like if I show up to the factory tomorrow, are the phones coming out going to be different than today? Significantly?
It shouldn't be.
Not significantly, right, Nigel? They will be different phones physically, right, Karen? I don't disagree with that. But they shouldn't differ significantly from the original product,
Right, right.
right? So when we imagine the population being the phones produced by this company, there's no requirement that it be on that individual day, right? And that's where, Roman, I don't have to multiply, because technically it's every phone that this company has ever produced, okay? I could come in, or every one of these phones, that I gotta be specific, this particular phone that this company has ever produced, okay? Because in theory, there should not be a difference when I show up on a Monday versus a Friday, okay? So when we envision this, I would say all, there goes my Apple Pencil, there we go, all phones, apparently I switched to blue, produced by the company. Okay. If we were restricted to a single day, right? The only reason I wouldn't give this a definitive number of phones, 3,750, which is 15 times 250, is because systematic samples require me to begin at a random element. So we don't actually know how many phones passed by us that day before we started grabbing them. Okay, so that's the only reason why we wouldn't put a guess to the number, but I like where you're going with that math, Roman. Like that is how I would establish that size. That's not wrong, okay? So in this particular example, I now want you to think, how can I relate what we just decided, that the sample is the 250 phones we inspected, and the population is all phones produced by that company, right? Then one of the numbers in this paragraph is directly associated with the sample of the 250 phones, and one of the numbers is directly associated with the phone itself, all phones produced by the company. So I want you to think, start with the sample where your life is a little bit more straightforward, right? The sample was easier for us to pinpoint. So I want you to think, what number comes from these phones? That would be the statistic. So what value would be our statistic? Yes, Brittany, no question mark. Say it with confidence. Get the question mark out of there. It is the statistic, okay? The value that came from the 250 phones. So where it says by the end of the day, 250 phones are inspected and found to have an average battery life of 11.4 hours. That's not every phone. That is those 250 phones have that average battery life. So our statistic is 11.4 hours, is though that is measured from those 250 phones. Nigel, I like where you went, because it's like, if I found that from this phones that I measured, it was 11.4 hours, then somewhere else in this paragraph, it's going to tell me how long they think the phone should operate without testing it, right? So then I look for it and I say, what number is related to all phones, right? And then that really helps me to really understand where Nigel got the 12, because they say that they advertise a battery life of 12 hours for this device. They don't say for these devices we made today, it's all of the phones better last 12 hours. So they are making a claim about the population. So yes, the 12 hours, or the value that comes from the larger group, every phone produced, that would be the particular parameter in this case. And man, Joseph, the parameter is still bigger than the statistic, but that's not necessarily going to be true all the time. Okay, I'm not
Does that
making that.
mean?
Say it again, Nigel.
I was gonna say, so does that mean that the parameter doesn't always, it's not always the number for like the direct population?
So the parameter is the number that is reported from the population, right? So when they first decided that they were creating this phone, Nigel, they tested it and said it lasts for 12 hours, right? And then we are like, we don't believe you. So we show up to their company and we sample 250 phones. And it's highly unlikely that every time we made a sample, the answer would be the same, right? So maybe next time we show up, we sample 250 and we get 11.7 hours, but it's still under 12, right? So yes, it would differ from the parameter most likely, but typically not significantly, or we would have a problem. Okay. Did that answer your question? They're very rarely the same number. Is that what you were really asking?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. Every time I take a sample, I'm trying to replicate that same value. Like I'm gathering the same data, right? Hours of operation. And then it's our job to see if it's really the same or not for that sample. Okay. And that's the whole point of statistics. In unit 3, we're going to like test, like, was the cell phone company right in saying it was 12 hours? And we can test that in unit 3, but that's 2 units away. Okay. So give me like 2 months and we'll get there and we'll be able to answer that question very directly. Okay. That's all I have for page 1. That's it. Are there major questions for me on numbers 1 through 3 at all? I'm saving this though, so that I don't lose any of this beautiful color and highlighting. So our job on this page is what's the big group, what's the small group, right? And we go from there to differentiate. If we can find the bigger group and the smaller group, then we can figure out the values that came from each one of those separately, okay? On the next page, we get into the nitty gritty of all those other vocab words we defined together, like the census, the voluntary response sample, the systematic sample, and the stratified sample, okay? And the cluster, I'll write them down at the top of the next page, so we have a running list to choose from, okay? One thing that I do want us to do on this next page is try to wait a second before we give a guess, so we can have as many students be able to read the sentence and give a guess as possible. Okay, so on the next page, we're going to try to work through seeing if this is one of the particular sampling methods we described on Tuesday using a particular scenario. So it's very similar to what you would see on like an exam or my take-home quiz. Okay, so looking at page 2, it says, identify the type of sampling used in each of the following situations, right? So let's make a running list of the choices we had last class. We knew that one of the choices was census. We also knew that we could have a voluntary response sample, a convenience sample. Then we saw, and I'm going to abbreviate SRS for simple random sample. Systematic was like the one we just saw with the every 15th phone. And then we saw stratified, and we saw cluster. So remember, just the ones that are a little bit, or that are like the most confused with one another are stratified and cluster, right? Because they both start with groups. So remember, if it's stratified, yes, everyone is in groups, but I show up at every group. I take a little bit from all of them if it's stratified. If it's cluster, everyone's in groups and I show up and I take the whole damn group and I survey everyone in the group. Okay, so our job is to figure out if it's a group problem. First, are there groups? Second, how do we go to the groups? Do we go to each of them or do we pick one and survey the whole group? Okay, so that's what we're trying to figure out if it's about groups. The other sampling methods have sort of like mild giveaways, right? Census implies that every single person had access to this survey in the population. Systematic, we knew from the last example that there has to be a value, a numeric value buried somewhere in there to tell us our system. So there are some giveaways for some of these. Let's read through and see if we can identify together. I'm going to start with letter A. I'm going to highlight what I think is important as well. It says to conduct a study on memory loss among the elderly in Howard County. all patients over 65 years old. Okay. All patients, that's over 65 years old. Oh, but then it gets really specific. In 2 randomly selected nursing homes in Howard County. Okay. So you guys might have ideas. So give me a second before you write your idea in the chat. In 2 randomly selected nursing homes. My question for you is, are there more than 2 nursing homes in Howard County?
Most certainly.
Yeah.
I could walk 10 minutes and find 3 from my house. Yes, Joseph, there are most certainly more than 2. So if I selected 2 of many, okay, so I chose 2 from many options. Then I went to those 2 and I survey everyone in both. Okay, so first I chose two of something. Then I showed up at both of those places and I talked to everyone at both places. What are the 2 nursing homes? Help me out here. What would we call that in a sampling method, Tim?
Like groups or clusters?
Yes. Oh, even better. They're clusters. Yes, they are groups. So the nursing homes, so this is me saying I chose 2 groups, right? That's what we're saying there. And then I surveyed everyone in both. That's what happened here. So I chose a nursing home, that's one cluster. I went down the street and I chose another one, that's another cluster. And then we surveyed every single person in the nursing home. So yes, I absolutely agree that these were considered clusters, and this is a cluster sample. I chose 2 of many groups and surveyed every single person in each. Questions, concerns? Okay, I wrote the red writing is pretty close to letter B. So if we don't have concerns about letter A, I'm going to go to letter B and we can keep going.
I actually have a
Go ahead,
question.
Joseph. Yes, please.
Is it okay? I know I've been coming up with like all these theories, right? With like different questions, but is it generally a good thing to think of if a question poses the word all, that is most likely a cluster?
It would either be a cluster
or
or what else? What's the one where we survey every single person?
Census.
Correct. That I would be differentiating between those 2, right?
Okay.
And then the one thing, so first it goes all patients over 65 years old. And my mind goes, oh, it's a census, right? And then it follows up with in 2 randomly selected nursing homes. Well, wait. That's not everybody over 65, right? That's everybody over 65 in 2 groups. So yes, that's where I have to do that follow-up. But yes, it would either be a cluster or a census. That's a dead giveaway. Thank you. So this word all was telling me a cluster or census. I have to then differentiate between the 2. Good job, Joseph. That was a great observation. We actually will see that language later. Repeat in another example. Good job. Okay, I'm going to go to B and I'm going to read it, but I don't mind like, wait, B, I don't understand A. You can go back and you can ask me a question. Okay, I don't mind it, but I want us to see how far we can get through these guys. In B, it says to maintain quality control in a bottling company, every 24th bottle coming off the production line was tested for an airtight seal. Every 24th bottle. That's our one, that's how we're choosing. So based on what we've decided today already for a couple examples, if we're looking at every 24th bottle, what kind of sampling method is that? We already had a very similar example of this. Okay, systematic, because we've given a system. So we're skipping, there's 23 bottles and we're taking the 24th, right? So we're skipping several in between to try to eliminate our personal bias. Okay, yes, this is my system, right? Every 24th bottle. What's another thing that you could think has to be given in a systematic sample? Am I going to be able to figure this out if there was no number written in this paragraph?
I'm not sure.
Right? It would,
No,
yeah, they have
but there has to be a
talk-
system.
Yeah, right. Joseph, you're like, I'm not sure, because it would be really confusing if they were just like, we chose the bottles however we wanted to choose the bottle. Like, what? We have to know how this was selected. So yes, there must be a value. Thank you, Karen. There's going to be a system provided for us. Our first example, the first one we saw on Tuesday was the system was every third, right? And then now it was 15th, now it's 24th. The number can change, but the process is not. Okay, so that's a great observation. Okay, let's try our next one, because a systematic requires a number. So that was a little bit, it's like potentially easier for some of us to identify. All right, let's look at this language and see if we can figure out what's going on. A CEO of a small company is interested in learning how their employees feel about their healthcare options. They speak with each of their 26 employees in order to gain more information. Okay, so it's like they have a small company. And what does this mean? They speak with each of their 26 employees. Who are they talking to?
All of them?
Everyone. Yes, Karen. If they speak to each of their 26 employees, they have just spoken with everyone. Nigel, is that what you're going to say to me, or did you have something else?
Yeah, I was gonna say that basically.
Okay. So if somebody speaks with each of their 26 employees, they spoke to everyone in the population. What? Yes, Nigel, I'm going to argue that you have one letter wrong there, but yes, it is a census. It's an S in the middle. Yeah, it's a census because they spoke with every single person in the population. Did the word all show up? No, right, Joseph? So it doesn't have to be there to be a census, but we have to be able to understand we spoke to every possible person, okay? And hopefully that's clear from this wording. Questions about that one?
No questions, just a comment. I thought I got confused at first because I thought when they said they spoke to everybody, each 26, I thought it was gonna be a voluntary response at first, but I don't
Okay,
know. I was getting inside my own head.
no, you are getting where everybody's head goes when we're trying to figure this out, and like specifically in a high stress exam situation, you're like, what did I miss in the wording, right? So my big thing with voluntary, Nigel, and everybody, is that for something to be a voluntary response sample, a very, very large group of people must have access to the survey, and then it is the choice of that person to respond. This CEO gave nobody a choice. All 26 of you are sitting down with me. All 26 of you are answering this question. If it were voluntary, the CEO would have sent them all like a survey link or a QR code or a Survey Monkey or whatever, and they would have had their choice to fill it out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
So
Good.
basically, if it's optional, then that's when we know it's a voluntary response.
If it's optional and the majority of the population has access, then yes, it would be considered a voluntary response sample. Yes. Technically, answering any question is optional, right, Joseph? Nobody can force me to answer the question technically, but in this case, they're saying, no, we really did talk to everybody, right? Like, so they really did get results from everyone, and that's where we're going with that. But yeah, no, if they offer it to me and then I choose on my own time to answer, that would be voluntary, correct? And we have an example of this coming up. So you guys are doing really well in terms of like reading deep into this, okay? Let's read D because the wording here is a little tricky. in terms of it's just like one run-on sentence is what I found in my first class. So let me read it carefully. A publishing company owns 4 different fashion magazines. So, okay, usually when they name numbers, it's important, right? So they have 4 different fashion magazines, each catering to a different type of shopper. To judge let me get rid of my mouse, it's in the way. To judge the appeal of a new clothing line, a random sample, okay, so random sample of 50 people from each of the 4 different magazines subscribers lists were selected. The 200 people selected were then asked to rate the new clothing line. Okay, so I want to clarify what that statement that I highlighted second is trying to say, right? It says a random sample of 50 people from each of the 4 magazines. So that is 50 people from 4 what? Where are those people coming from?
Groups.
4 groups, and they are different magazines. So they are unique. Remember the pinks and the blacks and the blues and the greens all being separated, right? By the color they were wearing. That's the fashion magazine. We're going to separate them by the colors that they're wearing or the fashion that they prefer. So it's 50 people from 4 unique groups. And yes, to my folks in the chat, what did I actually do? I split up the 4 magazines and I went like this. Some from here, some from here, some from here, and some from here. I went to every single one of them. I did not exclude a group. That is stratified. I went to each group and I chose some from each group. So I'm going to rewrite that in my own language. Some from each group. How do we feel about that? Are there any questions related to that? That was a new one that we just saw for the first time. So what are the groups? The 4 different fashion magazines, right? So we can also write up here that these are the 4 groups. They tell me right away. We've got 4 and they're different, right? So the groups are distinct. Just like we could see in our little picture on Tuesday, the little groups in lined up. Okay, we're gonna do one more before we like clear and scroll and take questions on the first 5, okay? We're gonna do the first, did we already do 5? No, we're gonna do the 5th one and then we'll take a look and see if there's any major burning questions. So far, so good. There's still some people who are quiet, so I want to make sure we're all feeling like we're all able to follow along and get the same answers though, okay? So if there's any questions or any confusion, I need to know. To conduct a satisfaction study for the local bus service, a transportation employee who rides the bus to work each day asked 15 other riders to complete a survey on her ride to work. Okay. So every day I take the bus to work, and today I went on the bus and I was like, oh, okay, I need some data. Y'all look good. I'm going to ask y'all. Yes, Nigel, Cassandra, Madison, I literally went, oh my God, you're the perfect person to answer it. I just turned to my right and asked somebody, right? I showed up to the bus one day, needed some data, and I asked the first 15 people I saw. That is absolutely convenience. Thank you, Karen, for letting me know. I sometimes get that notification, so let me know if you have any trouble, but that's the main reason I do the recording. Okay. Okay. So we asked 15 other people that were riding the bus with us. So what did we do? We had no plan. We asked only those nearby. And what do I mean by no plan, right? Like Guys, the stratified sample takes planning, right? 4 groups, talk to somebody in each of them. That takes work. To do a convenience sample, it doesn't take real work. Yes, I have to record some information, but I just have to find people and it doesn't matter who they are. Okay. And in other sampling methods, we're more careful about how we select those people to try to be more representative. Oh, I should probably write the name of the sampling method instead of just the note. I agree with you. It's convenience. I think I need to make these lines a little longer because my handwriting is so big. But yes, convenience. I agree. So before we have to scroll down, because you know, one page is only so big on your computer screen, and I don't want it to be so small we can't read together. How did we feel about A through E? Like, is it I totally feel like if I were to read these again and was really careful and I could underline some specific words, I would feel really confident. Or it's like, I need a hell of a lot more practice and I don't know about this. We've got 5 more. We're going to work on the remaining 5. Feeling pretty good? Okay. I want some people, if we're feeling, those who are feeling maybe a little less confident, we are going to finish the last 5 and just highlight some of the good stuff that's going on in the language. But I feel like we could really utilize, just like Davina was saying, the 1.1 online homework if you're really struggling, because it'll throw another few scenarios at you. Okay. So we're going to go through the last 5 together because there's 5 new examples and we haven't seen a voluntary response or an SRS yet, right? And I need to show you what that would look like in words. Then we can kind of move on to the next page and talk about qualitative versus quantitative. Okay. So downside of this packet, I have to clear it and scroll. I did save this picture, so I'm going to clear and scroll up and we're going to look at F through whatever is last. I don't know the letters. But if I ever clear too quickly and you want the picture of what the page just looked like, just send me a Canvas message and I can send you the picture I have. All right, 5 more. We've got this. A man inherits a house. Oh, Roman, wait. A man inherits a house full of possessions from a relative. You're ahead of me. The house contains many Chinese bowls, paintings, and old books. Okay, so they're telling me some stuff. It's got bowls, where's my highlighter? Bowls, paintings, and old books. He's interested in getting a sense of what they might be worth. So he picks a few bowls, a few paintings, and a few books. Okay, so Roman and Nigel just noted that if this guy goes in and picks a few bowls, a few paintings, and a few books, that he just showed up to every single group. Do you agree? He went to group 1 and got some stuff, group 2 and got some stuff, and got some stuff from group 3. So here they're describing some from each group. That's what they mean by a few bowls, a few paintings, and a few books. In the beginning, we're told about our 3 groups, our 3 distinct things, right? So the last time we saw stratified, the 3 things were the different fashion magazines that they own, that the company owned, right? The first time we saw groups, the groups were the nursing homes. Now the groups are artifacts, bowls, paintings, and books, things that are similar, okay? But the kicker and the key to me is that I went to each group. I did not ignore a group. Is that part clear to everybody? Yes? Okay. Then I want us all to feel confident and say, yes, this is stratified. Awesome. Yes, I love your thumbs ups and your yeses. You keep me going. Seriously, I wouldn't keep moving if I didn't see the thumbs ups and yeses. Norma, you're accidentally annotating my screen, so be careful. I didn't turn it off because I don't care if like I want you to write on it, but I don't want you to distract from somebody else. Okay, so just be careful. All right, letter G says, your coworker is interested in changing primary care physicians. She asks you and your fellow coworkers for opinions on doctors in the area. Ooh, so all she does is ask you and your fellow coworkers. Huh. So I want you to think that didn't take a lot of effort, right? Ooh, okay, we've got an argument in the chat. I love a good argument. Okay, my parents said I should be a lawyer because I really like to argue. So convenience versus voluntary response. All right, I want to go back to my description of voluntary response a little bit earlier for everybody. Okay, I want to clarify. I am absolutely volunteering my opinion on my doctor. That is true. But for something to be considered a voluntary response survey, a very large portion of the population must receive that survey and then choose to respond on their own. From what's being described here, someone showed up to work and just asked some close by people. They didn't send out a survey or an email to every coworker, right, in the entire building to ask about your favorite physician. She just asked you and your fellow coworkers for their opinions on doctors in the area, right? So, okay, good, Tim. Somewhere in here, I promise you, is voluntary. You're not wrong that there's going to be a voluntary response on here, but I have to ask a large group, okay? So this is asked only those nearly. I meant to write nearby. Nearby. So this was easy, right? She just was like, I know you, I'll ask you. If I want to be voluntary, I'm going to elicit responses from people I don't know to see what they say. Oh, so this would be, I keep wanting to move on without writing the answer. You guys are doing great. Oh, guys. Ugh. Don't look at me while I write the wrong answer down. I just had a discussion with Tim about why it was incorrect and then I wrote it wrong anyway. So I'm sorry about that. Kindle. Oh, sorry, Karen.
I had a question because it doesn't really say nearby. So how do you know it's not all of the coworkers?
Okay, so the one thing that in order for this to be voluntary, right, we would really need to have somewhere in this language that, and it doesn't have to explicitly be like a very large group got the survey, right? But the implication that all of our coworkers got it, and then I just waited to collect their responses. Does that make sense? And in this case, I'm like physically asking questions and I'm doing it in the moment. And a voluntary response survey is very much on the part of the participant to do that on their own time.
I see. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, it's a tricky distinction, and there is one in here, and I will, as many times as I need to, try to pick apart those distinctions. Oh, there's a question in the chat that says, would you say the parameters of a voluntary response sample are larger in general? I can't answer that question for the same reason I couldn't answer it for Joseph earlier, that I'm not sure if that sample is collected correctly and what exactly we're gauging in terms of the numbers. So I can't say that a parameter would have to be larger than a statistic. I can say that the size of the people who saw the survey in a voluntary response sample is larger, but they still have to choose to respond for their answers to be counted. Okay. Hopefully I'm answering these questions that I'm getting. Okay. So let me know if I still need to clarify something or if there's anything that's unclear, because this can be tricky. So I'm trying my best to make sure I answer everybody. All right. I'm going on to H, but tell me if I need to clarify anything else. It says, a list of students, this was really hard for me to read earlier too. A list of students, student IDs are randomly generated, and those students with a matching ID number receive a survey from the college. Get that question mark out of there, Cassandra. Yes, they used technology. They randomly generated the numbers and then they matched it to your ID. So basically, we're all sitting here with an ID number. A computer is on the back end making a list, and then we just match the numbers up and we talk to those people. Okay. Now, I do realize that it says they receive a survey, and then some of us are like, well, then they volunteer their answer. But the survey did not go to every student at the college, correct? It specifically went to randomly selected students. So this is a simple random sample. Excellent. I'm going to circle this piece and say that this is tech being used to randomly select. So this is an SRS. I guess I should have written that part, the tech part, in red, like I've been doing before. Technology must be used. It's somewhere in the language. There is an implication that a random number generator was utilized. Okay. And the process sounds like it's got to be planned and like kind of like intricate, right? Because that does not sound easy to you, does it? Get a random number generator out and look at all the ID numbers for everybody. That sounds like it would invest a lot of time. Okay. How about this one? After making an online purchase, customers are asked to follow a link and take a survey about their experience with the website. Customers are asked to follow a link, and take a survey about their experience. Yes. They choose. I see my chat is full of voluntary responses. I love it. Yes. The respondent chooses to answer this. How many times have you gone to the store and at the bottom, and maybe you don't even look, but at the bottom of your receipt, there's like a survey link. And they're like, sometimes they even mention it to you, right? They're like, you could fill out the survey about me and blah, 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 right? That is a voluntary response survey because I have to take my own time and I have to be opinionated enough to reach out and answer this survey, okay? So this is voluntary response. So this is, oops, I didn't mean to erase that. This should say everyone has access. They choose to answer. I hope that that really helps with the distinction earlier of convenience versus voluntary for a lot of us, but hopefully you can see that we all got the chance. It's up to us to take it. So I hope that clarifies some of my questions earlier. All right. Last one. All Math 138 students are required to take the final exam to assess their mastery of the course content areas. The results of the exams are investigated to explore areas that may need further attention in subsequent semesters. Ooh. Wait, so who are we surveying? Who are we
All
surveying?
students.
Oh, everyone.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you weren't. Who said that?
Everyone. All students.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah. So
All of them, not just, yes, all of the students. It's not just you guys who take the final exam. That would be totally unfair. It is every student registered in Math 138. So it is technically a census that tells me how much you learned in the semester, if we consider one test to tell me how much you learned. Okay, so this is a census, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to what Joseph said way earlier. All, right, equals everyone in the population. That was that key word that Joseph pointed out, I think in our very first example, where we were like, maybe it's a census, maybe it's a cluster, but we have to read on. This is a census because every single student in every single section takes it. It's not like we chose 2 sections and only they took the final. Okay, all of us do it. So this is considered a census. And we actually census you several times during the semester, Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3, and the final. Question J was worded differently. All 138 students. Hold on, I got a really good question. That's it's a hypothetical. So those are a little bit trickier for me. If question J, because I got to really think about a different scenario. If question J was worded differently, if it said all Math 138 students at HCC, would it be considered a cluster? What a great question. And I would still argue that it would have to be a census unless we were told that we were comparing HCC students to Maryland State. Like we'd have to be told that in some way that there are more groups that we're comparing it to. In this scenario, we've been provided exactly one large group and no mention of somebody else that we could have excluded, right? So I want to make sure that that's crystal clear as well, okay? Really good questions today. Yes, Davina?
So for this scenario, right, let's say it was worded like 95% of students in Math 138 were required to take a final exam. Would that still be census?
Man, you guys are hard. I would argue that it's an attempt at a census, right? Because your attempt is to get everybody to answer that. But that, I wouldn't consider that to be an appropriate sampling method or one of our sampling methods. If we're just somehow excluding 5%, but not saying why, right? I need to know how those people are chosen, right, Davina, to be able to really figure that out. And that's tricky. So we do want to kind of go like all or groups, or the group is selected specifically in this way, right? So like it's really, really clear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's a tricky one. You guys are asking me hard questions. I like it. All right. How we feel? I love hypothetical questions because it means you're really thinking about how I could change it for the next one around. Okay, so that's really good. My goal is to get us to the quantitative versus qualitative portion of our chapter today. Okay, and on the next page, the reason that I want to go through example 5 is because it is just like the example I give you on your take-home quiz, just a different scenario. Okay, and we kind of pick through it in the same way, try to find the variables buried within the paragraph. Okay, so I want us to go on to page 3 to take a look at what information we can gather from a research study, and then how can we use that to decide if the variables are qualitative or quantitative. Okay, so I have to, in the interest of time and making sure that we get a little bit more done today, I'm going to move on to page 3. Before I do that, I want to take any final questions on page 2 before I have to clear it. You guys did a really good job. Pat yourself on the back. Sampling methods are hard. It's a lot of new vocab in one day, so I'm really proud. And as Davina suggested earlier, possibly going down now doing that online homework would even tie that in and make you feel even more confident tonight. Okay, on this next page, what I did is I just grabbed like a little blurb, like an abstract of a research study way back. I mean, it's conducted in 2012. It's in no way recent information. However, it helps us to understand this idea of breaking apart a research study. And this is back in our old textbook. This was referred to as the 6 W's. It is not a direct objective in our new book. However, it still is something that we should really try to understand based on the wording in something that's provided. I also think somewhere in our head, we have this like idea that the subjects have to be people. The only way we can gather information is by talking to people. And that is just not the case. We can gather information from pretty much any object in the world. Okay. And we can get data from that. So I want to make sure that we don't kind of have a closed-minded view of what the study would actually be focusing on. So we're going to read this together. We're going to go through the who, the what, the where, the when, the where, the how, and the why. And very quickly, because our focus is on the what. I want to know what we recorded. What is the information that we cared about in this study? So it's a long paragraph. So I'm going to read it out, and then we're going to go through and we're going to try to decide what was the most important information that kind of helps us figure out who that information was gathered about. All right. In June 2012, Consumer Reports published an article on some sport utility vehicles they had tested recently. They reported basic information about each of the vehicles and the results of some tests conducted by their staff. Among other things, the article told the brand of each vehicle, its price, and whether it had a standard or automatic transmission. They reported the vehicle's fuel economy in miles per gallon, its acceleration or number of seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour, its braking distance to stop from 60 miles per hour. The article also rated the vehicle's reliability as much better than average, average, worse, or much worse than average. Well, it's a lot of information, but whenever I read a research study like this and they start just like listing a long list of information, that is what I recorded about each of the subjects. So I'm going to highlight that first, the list, because it might help us. There's actually 2 lists and then a second sentence, but it's fine. We'll highlight all that information because I think it'll help you figure out who the subjects are, right? So what did we record? We recorded the brand, the price, standard or automatic transmission. Those are the first 3 things. And then it goes on to say, they also recorded the fuel economy, which is in miles per gallon, acceleration, which was number of seconds, and the braking distance. And then one more thing, it says, finally, the article also rated each vehicle's reliability. So if I look at all the things I just highlighted, that information comes directly from the subjects, the research subjects themselves. So who is this study about? Who are the subjects based on the information that we highlighted as being collected? Are the subjects the cars themselves? Are the subjects the people intending to buy the car? Who are the subjects in this article? Who did we research?
The cars.
The cars.
Vehicles.
Yeah.
Vehicles,
What
yeah.
specifically, what, like, not just cars, right? Like, because cars is like sedans, minivan, like I could throw anything in there. We singled out sport utility vehicles. So not just cars, but they had to be SUVs. But yes, I'm into it. They are not people for certain. Did anybody think maybe the buyers of the car were supposed to be the subjects? Just so I can clarify.
I did.
Yeah, Kendall, it's a little weird, right? Because it's like, well, who's this for, right? I agree with you, Kendall, that the article itself is for the people who want to buy the car. I don't disagree with you because that's why I would want that information. The question is, did I speak to those people or did I speak to the cars and get the information from the cars themselves? So when I look at this, it brand, price, transmission type, right? That's information that I would gather from the car itself, as opposed to interview a person and gather information from them. Does that clarify a little bit?
Yeah.
Professor,
Yeah.
it may be easier for people like Kendall and other people who might have questions, like maybe to write out the definition of this, of what a subject is and what a variable is.
Oh, I mean, yes, I'm sorry. The subjects are those who are being researched, right? This is being researched, as opposed to the reason behind the research, which Kendall is the consumer, which was like where your mind was kind of going, okay? The variables themselves are the information that was recorded. What's recorded? Oops, I can't spell. Recorded. Right? What information was actually written down? That's where we go to the what. Okay. So if I am able to include this list of the things that we gathered from the paragraph, right? That can help me figure out why I would have cared to do this research, etc. Okay. So if we talk about who is being researched and then what information we actually wrote down, then we get a lot more, right? We wrote down, see, the brand. We wrote down the price. I'm gonna make a running list. It's 7 things. I'm just gonna call this transmission. Then fuel economy. I'm gonna abbreviate that. Acceleration. Braking distance. And reliability. So what were we gathering information about? What values did we record? That would be considered our variables. Further down the line, when we get to part B, we'll decide where they fall in our more distinct definitions of variables, right? Which fall under whether they can be considered numbers with units or not. So we'll get into that in part B. So give me a second to get there. However, real quick, why would someone want this information? Like, why would anybody want the brand, price, transmission type, fuel economy, acceleration, braking distance, and reliability? What's the point of this information?
To decide whether to buy the car.
I agree, Karen. I don't know why the price would be included if I wasn't going to potentially use this to make a decision, right? So I agree with you, Karen. I'm going to jump down to why. The only reason we would get all this information is to inform, oh my goodness, I skipped the letter N, to inform a future customer, right? Customer, I cannot spell. Did I spell that? Okay. Struggling, guys, this morning. Why would I care about that information? Because somebody's going to buy this car. And frankly, guys, we all make different decisions when we buy our car. Some of us buy it based on price. Some of us buy it based on fuel economy. Some of us buy it based on the transmission type, right? It really depends on what you care about, but that's why we would report such a variety. Okay, when did we gather the information? Is that crystal clear? When the information was gathered, or in parentheses, when the research was conducted. Davina?
So I was gonna say that it was published in 2012.
Right, so if it was
yeah.
published then, when did the research have to happen?
In the year of 2012.
Sometime before June 2012, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would just say, I'm just gonna be really basic and go before June 2012, just like you were saying, sometime before, yep. And I'm not even gonna say when, but it's just gonna be before June 2012. I see you in my chat, excellent job, thank you. I saw you, Zoe and Cassandra, so thank you very much. This is a weird one. Where? Does it say where? Is there any information about a location?
No.
Ooh, y'all, guess what you get to do when there's no information? For the first time in your life in a math class, you can write, I don't know. And that's the correct answer. What? For the first time, because none of us are here to guess. None of us are here to lie about the information that's presented. So just say, you can either say, I don't know, or you can say unknown, right? We don't know where this research was actually conducted. We could make some guesses based on the fact that it was about SUVs and the only people in the world who buy SUVs are American citizens, but we don't have that information. So we're going to say, I don't know. Now, is it clear how they did it? Because in all our other examples before this, they were like, we randomly selected. We selected every 15th SUV coming off the conveyor belt. Is it clear? Like, did they say what they did to get the information?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, it's really, really like they tested some vehicles, right, Joseph? Like, what does that mean? That doesn't really mean a lot. So we don't have a ton of information. All we can say is tests conducted by research staff. So in working through this problem, there's a major reason why we do something like this. And it's that theoretically, I could have asked you the who, what, when, where, how, and why of every problem we've done so far. the one with the dogs that were overweight, the one with the phones coming off the conveyor belt, the one with the presidential election. There is a group of subjects. There's information that we've collected. We maybe know when and where it happened. We might know how, and typically the information can help us figure out why, right? What did we gather and why might that be important to someone? Okay. So all research studies that we ever see can actually be assessed this way. Do they have to be explicitly broken down into these categories? No, but is it important for us to distinctly know what goes where? I think so. Okay, Davina, you're unmuted. Do you have a question for me?
Yes.
Okay,
So
what's up?
for the how, right? If we don't necessarily know how it was systematically conducted, then would you say that it was tested randomly?
I wouldn't unless I had that language available. I would probably, this is most likely just a convenience sample, right? Because and they likely showed up and like tested the SUVs on the lot, right? But we don't know, and they didn't say. So we're not going to assume that it's random, because random implies that it's representative, like, right, that it represents the diversity in the population, and we don't know that for sure.
Right, okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Really good question. I do need that language in there to use the randomness. Okay. Okay. Now we're on to the part where we really are like focusing on a new definition that I know you learned for either last class or today. And this just chapter 1 is a little long, so I'm trying to play pick up with your videos, okay, or catch up with your videos. However, I know that one of the things we really wanted to look at was whether something was quantitative versus qualitative. Okay, so I'm gonna divvy this up, and we're gonna actually make 2 little running lists. So I'm just gonna go like this. I'm putting a line down the middle, and I'm a little lazy with the writing. So instead of writing out the whole word, I'm just gonna write qual for qualitative, because that's a different letter than on the other side where I'm gonna write quan for quantitative. And why? Because my handwriting is just massive, and I want you guys to see what's going on. I know that it's more straightforward to define a quantitative variable. So we're going to start there. A quantitative variable is a number with measurement units. So this is a number with units. Okay, if you are unable to assign units to a number, then it is not quantitative, right? It has to have units for it to be considered quantitative, which then makes qualitative really hard to define. But qualitative variables define categories. So these define categories. Like, what's your favorite color? Pink, blue, orange, green, right? Everyone who chooses pink goes in the same category. Everyone who chooses orange goes in the same category. And we're all kind of like lumped together. That would be considered something qualitative, okay? Where we all group together with the same value or trait. Like we all like the color pink, or we all like the color orange, or whatever. Now, if you read this question, it specifically says, list the variables from part A. So that's specifically right here under the what. Remember, the variables are the information we recorded, whether that be a number or a category. They were all considered variables. So everything under the word what, it belongs on either the qualitative side or the quantitative side. So we're gonna together kind of like put these in each one of them, but we're going to do it as a group because everybody deserves to practice, and no, I don't think anybody should jump ahead of somebody else. So whenever I list one of these, you're all going to get in the chat because I know you want to participate, and it's not my 8 a.m. class. It's 11:30, so you guys should be mildly more awake than my 8 a.m. class. You get in the chat and you can type 4 letters, either qual or quan, and then we're going to answer it all at the same time, and then we'll talk about it if we don't agree. Okay? All right, you got to do this with me because I don't want you guys just shouting out random stuff. So we're going to go in order. If I'm looking at the brand of a vehicle, would that be considered quan or qual? Oh, I did it wrong. Qual or quan? I'm in the wrong order. Brand, qual or quan? I don't need the you, Umi, I know you spelled, I know what you mean. Yes. Yes. A brand is a name, right? Toyota, Chevy, GMC, whatever, right? Okay, brand. I totally agree. It goes under qualitative. I love it. We're going to lump everybody in a category who owns the same brand of car. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to cross it out. Price. Is price going to fall under qual or quan? Price. You're killing it. But it says that if we do decide it's quantitative, we have to list possible units of measure. So if somebody were recording the measurement of price, what's the measurement that one would typically record?
Dollars.
Yeah, USD, right? Dollars. I agree. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to add it to price, and then I'm going to put in parentheses the dollar sign. That's how I would measure the units that were recorded there. Good. Okay. Now the next word is transmission. And it says in the paragraph whether it had standard or automatic transmission. So would that be considered qualitative or quantitative if we're talking about transit? I almost said transition. Transmission. It's like a box to check, right? Either yes, I'm automatic, or yes, I'm a standard transmission. I totally agree with you. It's qualitative. We fall into one or the other category. And even as a driver, you fall into a category too. I can drive both a standard and automatic, or I can only drive an automatic, right? Something like that. So that is a category. Excellent. So we would put transmission and qual. All right, I'm crossing it out. This one, it could be a little bit tricky, but it's fuel economy. What do we think about fuel economy? Depending on whether you really understand the concept, qual or quan. I was going to say, Ashley, you're giving me units, but you're saying qual. I see you. Okay. I agree with the quantitative people. Sometimes some of us may not know what fuel economy represents. In parentheses, MPG means miles per gallon. So that is a measurement unit in itself, miles per gallon. So fuel economy does fall under quantitative. So I'm going to abbreviate it, and then in parentheses, I'll put miles per gallon. So it's telling me how many miles can I go on the average gallon of gas in my car. All right. How did they measure the vehicle's acceleration? Oh God, I just gave it away. Well, I guess it's quant, because I just said, how did they measure it? That's just mean. Okay, so they did measure the acceleration. I slap myself for giving it away. What was it measured in? This was hard for my previous class because the wording was weird, but I tried to highlight it to help, because it says acceleration and then it goes number of seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. But what's the actual number I record? Is it the miles per hour or the seconds for the measurement? That's what I want to know. Even though I gave it away. Yes. Have you ever listened to the car commercials where it's like, this car goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, or like, less than 2 seconds or something like that. And they're like, it's a sports car, be excited, right? They're trying to give us this like little short amount of time so we can just speed, right? Like it doesn't take a long time for my car to increase in acceleration. So yes, it is. While the word acceleration, if you're in a physics class, is measured in length per time, this is technically the number of seconds to increase the speed. Good. And man, I gave it away. So I'm annoyed by myself. Okay, we've got 2 more and I'm going to make you guess. Hopefully I don't give anything else away. Braking distance. Qual or quan? Braking distance. I like where we're going. I kind of want you to think any distance is going to be quantitative, right? Because it's distance is like something we can measure. You know what I mean? What would be reasonable for like, if my car is stopping from 60 miles per hour, what would be a reasonable measurement unit for braking distance? If we're going to give it some units. Oops, braking. Anybody have like a maybe something that might be more reasonable? Yeah, yards or feet. I totally agree. In my previous class, we were joking because someone was like miles. And I was like, oh my God, I hope it doesn't take my car a mile to stop when it's going 60 miles per hour. That would be terrible. Okay. So likely the measurement unit is smaller, like feet or yards. I'm going to go with feet so that we don't like take miles to stop our car. Okay. Yards, I totally agree with too, Roman. I really do. But feet, for whatever reason, and I love that you said yards, because in the US we use yards and not meters because we're crazy. Yeah. Okay. So the braking distance here in feet or yards, either one would be reasonable. One left. Reliability. Is that quantitative or qualitative? Reliability. Okay, I agree because I'm like putting myself into the much better than average category. I do have a question for you though. What if it was a scale of like, what's the vehicle's reliability on a scale from 1 to 5? Does that change your answer from qualitative to quantitative?
I would say no, because
I would say no as well. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Nina, say why, say why.
because there's really no measurement. Like, yeah.
5 means nothing.
Yeah, because
Yes.
it's still being put into a category. It's not, it's
They're
either
just
a 1
saying-
or a 10.
Exactly. They're just like 5 is best, 1 is worst, or reverse, right? They just tell us what it means, but there are no units to that. There's no meaning numerically to that number other than a ranking, right? So it's still putting me in a category, which is the language Joseph used. I really like that. So this would be under qualitative reliability, even if it was measured on what we call a Likert scale, which is like the 1 through 5 scale. It would still be considered qualitative. Good job. That's tricky too, because when we see numbers, we want to think quantitative, right? But sometimes that's not the case. Okay, really, really good work. We went through all 7 of them and you guys were able to put them into the correct group. And if they were quantitative, we assign units. I want you to think, because we just finished this problem, if you wanted to, you could go home this weekend and do number 1 on your take home list, because it is identical to this problem in terms of list the variables, tell me if they're quantitative or qualitative. I don't need you to go through the W's, the who, what, where, when, just the variables. Okay, so you can go home and practice that this weekend and do that just like we did in class together. Quantitative or qualitative. If it's quantitative, guess on what the units might be. It helps you. If you can assign it units, it's quantitative. But if you tell me it's quantitative and then you struggle to find the units, maybe it's not quantitative, right? Maybe that was the mistake. Okay, so let's think about that too. All right, we have a limited amount of time. There's one other thing I want to at least get to today, and that's to see the same information displayed in a data table. So it's not the exact same data, but it is similar to if I could give you information in a paragraph like we just did, or I could provide you with information in a data table and we could still gain information from that without, even really processing or plugging any numbers into anything. Okay, we're just going to read the chart and try to understand a little bit what's going on. So I'm saving this page. Oh my gosh, excuse me. And I'm going to clear it and scroll just so I can see that data table at the bottom in the limited time we have. Just in case in Alex, they give you a table and not a paragraph, right? I want you to be prepared. It says below are the purchase records for album orders from Amazon. Use the data table to answer the following questions. And remember that in our previous question, it was like, what does who mean? And we said that's who's being researched, or that's what we gather the information about, right? And in the previous question, that was the SUVs themselves. So when I look at this table, I want to know if it says how many individuals. So I'm trying to figure out the subjects, right? Who are the subjects? So I want you guys to help me. Are the subjects the people who made the purchase, or is the subject the order themselves, the order itself? Based on the way this is organized, can we help try to figure out who the subjects are? Is it the people who made the purchase or the orders themselves?
I would say the orders.
Okay. Is there anybody who can tell me something in the table that's telling them it can't be the people? Did anybody see something in the table that says the people can't? Thank you, Zoe. Catherine H. from Ohio. Take a look at Catherine. This lady from Ohio with this area code showed up and purchased one album. And then she came back later and was like, I am not done. I need another. But Catherine is two distinct lines in that table. So even though it's the same person, because she's placed two separate orders, the orders are the subjects. So in this case, subjects equal orders. So now with that in mind, how many individuals or individual subjects are shown in this table? If we now know each order is unique. Ooh, Roman, each order is unique. Catherine, the fact that she showed up a second time actually means that she ordered something another time. So be careful. Yes, she is considered two separate orders. That's right, because she placed two separate orders. Does that make sense, Roman? Just to make sure we clarify.
I have a question.
Yeah,
What if she bought the same album? It would still be 5 orders, correct?
it would still be 5 unique orders because nowhere on here. Oh, she might have. Look, she might have bought the same damn album. Kansas, right? I don't know. She might have bought the exact same album twice, or she bought their first album and then their second one. But if she bought them in two separate instances as two separate purchases, right, Joseph, they will show up uniquely. That's correct.
Okay, so it would still be considered 5 individuals are shown on the table then.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
Oh,
Because-
that's why, because it's two different ones, two different albums.
And you're saying that individuals really isn't the person, it's the order.
That's right. It's like every time, guys, have you ever, and I'm like an Amazon Prime kind of person, but have you ever gone on Amazon, placed an order, and then been like, oh, I need something else. And then you go on Amazon and you place another order and it's like the same exact day. Okay, maybe that's just me. However, that is, thank you, Karen. Thank you. I'm not the only one. That is 2 unique orders in Amazon, right? So if this were a chart of everything that happened on Amazon, I would be popping up there twice that day because I went in there twice to make 2 unique orders. That's what we're talking about here too. Good. Okay. I was about to go across, but we're supposed to go down. So we already did this one. What kind of variable is price? From the previous chart, we knew that price had to be considered what? On or qual? Yes, Karen and Aaliyah. We defined it before as quantitative. And I'm even going to stick in that it's $10.99, $16.99, $15.98. If you look at the prices, those are likely US dollars as well, since we're doing Amazon purchases. And they're all from the United States.
Except for one of them. One of them's
Where?
from Canada.
Oh my God, you're right. Gosh. US
But
dollars.
it's still considered quantitative because it's an increment of currency. So
Yes, and I'm guessing that might still be in US dollars, but I don't know. It depends.
who
But
knows?
yes, it's an increment of currency. Okay, what about the order number? If you look at those order numbers, are they quantitative or qualitative? Order number. Don't all jump at once. with your confidence in the answer.
Well, we don't know what's in the order.
Okay, well, we know what's in the order, but we don't, but does that number represent a specific amount of units? Is that like the size of the order? Right? That
No.
number, yeah, it's just kind of identifying the order. Ashley, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it's qualitative, I guess, because it doesn't have a unit, like it's just a number.
Yes, if I look at that series of numbers, other than the fact that the first line stands for Karen from Ohio purchasing her first album, it is meaningless numbers. They're just there to represent her order, but they don't have units attached to them. So that's the big kicker that I want you to take away from Ashley's statement. I don't know what units I would attach to that. So this would be considered qualitative. And I'm going to go one step further and tell you that they're called, and I just think it's important. It's like nice information for you to know. It's called an identifier variable because it identifies just that order and only that order. Another example of that would be your social security number. That's an identifier qualitative variable. Your social security number is also numbers, but there are no units, right? And that number identifies you and only you. So that would be considered an identifier, but it's a special kind of qualitative variable, right? It's just a number with no units. Same context. What about area code? Qualitative or quantitative?
Also qualitative.
It is, yes. What does it tell me? What is my area code? Like what is it giving me? What information?
It's a location.
It lets you
It
know
is.
like what place, yeah, this person is from.
Yeah, so it is a location, right? Your area code technically defines a location. So like if you purchased your cell phone in California, your area code would be California's area code, right? But maybe you live here because that's where the purchase was made, right? But it does define the location where the purchase was made. It is not an identifier because so many of us out there have the same area code, right? So that would not identify you and only you, but it would put us all into the same category. Okay. Careful, Karen. Yeah. Want to know what is an identifier, Karen? My entire cell phone number, right? From start to finish, all 10 digits, that would identify me and only me. But if you just take out my area code, a lot of other people have the same area code as me. Does that track? Do you understand the difference there?
So as long as the number has like no numerical value, as long as it represents a person, it's okay. Like it's a qualitative data. But if
That's
it's like
correct.
a number, like if it's like a number that's a price, because it is a price, like, and it's just a price.
And
that
because
makes
there
it-
are, and because I can measure it, Nigel, and I
Yes,
can
and you can
attach
measure it.
units to it.
It has
Yes,
actual value. Okay.
that's what makes it quantitative. The value on it. Yes, it's measurement. Good. Okay. With that question, we hit 11:50. The first thing we're going to do is we'll finish up, do a couple ordinal, nominal, discrete, continuous, and we'll finish up the little part of chapter 1 that we still have left. And then if we have time, we'll start chapter 2 next Tuesday. I do have your take-home quiz set to be due, I think next Wednesday. However, if I don't feel like that's enough time for you to absorb the information on Tuesday and then submit it, I might be able to push that back a day or two so you could still submit early for feedback after Tuesday's class. Okay, so I will consider that. I'll just change it in the Canvas calendar if that's the case. So otherwise, you could answer everything on your take-home quiz except for probably two questions maybe that are about the things that we haven't covered. But you could totally do the qualitative, quantitative one we just did. And there's sampling methods that you could go through and you could guess those too. Okay.
Would
And
the
I can
same
give
apply
early
for
feedback.
Alex, Professor?
The same applies for Alex. I feel like we didn't get to the ordinal nominal, so maybe you might not want to finish 1.2, but you could totally most likely do it on your own. Okay, Joseph?
Okay.
Okay, great question. All right, guys, I'm a minute over, so I'll hang back and I'll answer any last minute questions that you guys might have. Remember that you have your introduction video due tonight, and I'll be able to take a look at all those by the weekend. And then if you can submit your take-home quiz to me over the weekend, go for it, and I'll give you early feedback. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Otherwise, have an amazing weekend. You made it through the first week of class. Congratulations.
You can give us
All right,
feedback
Professor
on
Bell,
the
you have a
quiz.
good one.
Have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend. I think somebody just asked me a question.
Yeah, I did. You can give us feedback on the quiz.
Absolutely, Davina. Turn it in
Oh.
early and I'll tell you if it's right or wrong.
Bet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Professor
Bell.
Thank you, Professor.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
In the box on question 6, question A, or for question 6, it says how many individuals are shown in the table above. So if we had that on an exam, I wouldn't have picked the Catherine, correct? Catherine twice. I would have just said it's 4 individuals. So why do we pick her? Why do we say it's 5 when it's 4 individuals?
Okay. So remember that Catherine is here from Ohio with this area code,
Mhm.
and the artist might be the same, but this album is actually a unique purchase. Okay, Isella? So Catherine, let's say she showed up at 9 a.m. She bought the album for $10.99. She listened to the whole thing, and then she was like, I gotta have the next one. So she went in at 1 o'clock that afternoon and she bought the second album. Right, Isella?
Okay,
She made 2 unique purchases at 2 separate times. So Amazon is actually calling her 2 unique orders, right? Because one is the one that I got earlier, the first album, and the second order is the one that I bought later that day.
okay. So I wouldn't look at the names, I would look at the order numbers.
Because
And that,
in this case, Catherine isn't the unique part, right? The fact that
Okay.
she went and bought a second album is the unique part. Yes, yes.
okay. So now I know. Okay,
Okay.
all right,
Yes.
got it.
Is that tricky?
Yes.
100%. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's why I wanted to get to this table before you go into your homework over the weekend, just in case there's like something wishy-washy like that, where they're trying to trick you by like having something repeat. Okay.
Right, okay, thank you, I got it, okay.
Awesome. All right, cool. Have a great weekend. Ume.
Yes, I have a question about the homework that is in the module and then on the Alex. So the one in the Alex, that's what we are doing, because on the module, when we click on the homework, it shares no additional information.
Oh, yes. If you click on it in the modules, it's just there to have the due date there to remind everybody that they are associated with chapter 1. Yes. But you're right. You do there is no true link between Canvas and Alex. You can't access Alex from within Canvas, unfortunately. That's correct.
Okay.
So you do have to like leave and go to Alex. So that is on me but I put it all in order just so you know, like once we finish this, you can do all this. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I was confused. Like we have to do on both side homework.
Only, no, there's nothing to do in Canvas. Just go to Alex and your grade will just populate it'll come.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I had a question about the packet.
Yeah, Ashley, what's up?
So like right now, like we're working on it, like from your view, you're working on the packet, but we're not turning in the packet in any way, right? So I can write this down like just in my notebook.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah, I want you to have this information in whatever format is the easiest for you to study from, to learn from, and then to ask me questions later just to like remember what we did in class. If you can be like, I'm on page 3, number 6, and just write it, you don't need the packet. There might be some problems like with the sampling methods where we highlighted and we circled that would be more relevant in the future, right? For the wording.
Yeah.
But for right now, no, you don't necessarily have to have it.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm not collecting it. It's for you to learn from. Yep.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
No problem. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you.